Street Fighter 4. Long thought to be dead, when images of Street Fighter 4 first hit the web in late 2007, people got excited. Because it looked like it was in 3D, which was a cause for concern. I remained cautiously optimistic. The Street Fighter series seemed like it hit its absolute pinnacle in Street Fighter 3, so what could Street Fighter 4 do to win people back? Street Fighter 3 was all about taking risks and doing new things. So with Street Fighter 4, the goal was to replicate Street Fighter 2. All the characters from Street Fighter 2 are back. Well, mostly. I'll get into that later. And the game is definitely going for a Street Fighter 2 look and feel. As I've repeated multiple times, there's a time to take risk and a time to play it safe. This is definitely a time to play it safe. How shall I sum up the story of Street Fighter 4? It's not a sequel to 3, but rather an interquel set in between 2 and 3. That would technically make it Street Fighter 2.5, right? Not that it matters, as the interquel series between 1 and 2 is called Street Fighter 0 in Japan. Try to make sense of that. But basically the story is that a new organization called SIN is seeking to finish what Shadaloo started by taking over the world. Ryu is looking to further improve himself as a warrior, while Ken is a soon-to-be father. Chun-Li and Guy are looking to investigate Shadaloo's resurgence, while Bison is revived again. There are also a bunch of side stories, but that's the basic main plot. I will say this in the original Street Fighter 4, they used anime cutscenes aside from having a few cameos here and there, but what I will say about the cutscenes is that they are terribly animated. Just look at this still from Zangief's original Street Fighter 4 opening. Look at this! What is this? I mean, no, really, what is this? I can see why for Super Street Fighter 4 they instead did still images with dialogue. Really, the focus of Street Fighter 4 seems to be based on rivalries. Ryu and Ken as always, Chun-Li versus newcomer Crimson Viper, and Guile versus Abel, who has some history with Big Bad Seth, and may have some kind of connection to Guile's deceased friend Charlie. Of course, whether or not Charlie is dead is a question that will be answered in the next game. I find the focus on rivalries to be very unique. I wish Mortal Kombat focused more on that, but that series has moved away from the rivalry role, for better or for worse. Now, as for the characters, Street Fighter 4 brings back most of the cast from Street Fighter 2. Everyone's appearances are set after their Street Fighter 2 appearance. It makes sense that they're trying to sell 4 as a more direct sequel to 2. Super added in the only 2 characters from 2 who didn't make it in originally. In comparison to 3, 4 keeps the new characters to a minimum. First up we got Abel, who as already mentioned is hidden to have a connection to main villain Seth. Seth and Abel, so where's Kane? Subtle, isn't it? There's Crimson Viper, a double agent who seems to play both sides, but she's definitely antagonistic towards the heroes, but she's softened by the fact that she has a daughter.
Hello? Is that right? That's great news, sweetie.
There's El Fuerte, who is a Mexican cook who is just another stereotypical character in Street Fighter. Finally, that leads us to Rufus, who is acrobatic given form. They really put an uncomfortable amount of detail into his weight. It's amazing that he can move so well being that overweight. His deal is that he wants to beat Ken because despite having never met Ken, he's insulted that he's considered the best fighter in America. Rufus is really, really stupid. His win quotes are so long that I barely have time to read them. Rounding out the new characters, there is Gouken, Ryu and Ken's master who did not die at Akuma's hands, but rather put himself into a healing coma or something. It's stupid, but Gouken is meant to be a nod to the infamous Shenlong rumor from Street Fighter 2. I can see why he's the master of Ryu and Ken, as his moves are more finesse than the moves Ryu and Ken do. Super adds more characters. It adds some Street Fighter 3 characters back to the fray, which is appreciated, as it does help 4 feel like a game that bridges the gap between 2 and 3. There are 2 new characters added, most notably in the form of Juri, a villainess, which is a first for the series. She's mostly characterized by how sadistic she is. She reminds me a lot of Azula from Avatar The Last Airbender. The other new character added to 4 is Hakan, who is a Turkish oil wrestler. In contrast to Juri, who's all about sadism, Hakan is really, really silly, and his moves border on feeling like something out of a cartoon. The arcade edition adds 4 more characters. Yun and Yang return from 3, and Evil Ryu makes a return as well. But a sort of half-new character, half-old character is Oni, who is basically a what-if Akuma had let go of whatever remained of his humanity. But damn if his moves aren't a spectacle to look at. Ultra Street Fighter 4 adds 4 more characters. Hugo and Rolanto return from previous games, and Poison is properly introduced here. She's a hard character to describe. She has a riding crop as her weapon. It is fun to use on various characters to see their reaction. Finally, there's DeCapri, a Kami clone whose story seems kinda generic. Their relationship is similar to how I always saw Kitana and Melina's relationship until MK9 retconned it to where they had no relationship at all, but that's another story. Now, with all the characters out of the way, the presentation is very bright and colorful. While I consider the faces to be a little on the derp side, particularly Ryu's, it definitely feels like aesthetically a sequel to Street Fighter 2 as already mentioned. The characters now have all full-fledged voice acting both in English and Japanese. You can choose which language you want to have, it's nice to have options. There's a stylish filter to the way characters move as they always leave a mark when they do focus attacks. I love how interactive the backgrounds are in this game. The way the crowd reacts to the fight breaking out, seeing the background be affected by the fight really immerses you into the game. The music is also really good too. Speaking of focus attacks, that's the new gameplay addition. They take the place of parries, for the worst in my opinion. They can negate some damage where your meter will slowly recover, but a strong enough attack will break your focus attack. You can do EX moves more willingly, and I find that these are a great way to mix up the combos. But in addition to the super meter, which will build your meter up to allow you to do super attacks like normal, you now have the revenge gauge, which will allow you to do ultra attacks. These are more cinematic versions of super attacks. Super Street Fighter 4 added an additional ultra attack to do. You can have access to both with ultra, but this comes at the cost of the attacks being weaker, so it's up to you to decide what you want to do. I just love the oh crap expression everyone gets when they see what's about to come. And the expressions on everyone's faces as they get hit are always a treat. Arcade mode takes out the ability to choose your opponent, playing like arcades of old. I don't mind this, but it's a shame to take out player interactivity. Super Street Fighter 4 added back in bonus minigames, which are lifted wholesale from Street Fighter 2. Before the final boss, as always, we have the rival battle, and they can range from simple friendly spars to something incredibly silly or just a misunderstanding. It feels like everyone could work out their problems just by talking to each other, but that would be missing the point. Now we get to the final boss, Seth. Oh boy, Seth. I will say it's interesting. In the original Street Fighter 4, you fight Seth in a laboratory that's occupied, and as the battle goes on, you see the workers scrambling to evacuate. While in Super Street Fighter 4 and onward, you fight Seth in an abandoned laboratory that looks like it's been abandoned. What can I say about Seth? He likes to hear himself talk. He constantly says the same old villain monologue, and it really does make you want to beat him to shut him up. In the first round, he's really easy, just knock him around. But that's when he gets back up, effectively baiting you into thinking that he was easy. That's when he starts using every single move in his arsenal against you, but he has nothing original. He's like Cell from Dragon Ball Z, in that he has every single move every other fighter has had. Fortunately, repetition sets in. Just jump like a maniac over his attacks, and eventually you'll beat him down. That leads into the endings. The endings all seem to continue with one another, and it's hard to watch them in order. Some are relatively self-contained, but they're very abrupt for that reason, which is why it seems the intention was always to make an updated follow-up, since those endings provide much more closure. They're better animated than the openings, but that's not saying much. So despite this technically being a step up from 3's endings, they feel more like a step down. So that concludes Street Fighter 4. It definitely plays it safe in terms of gameplay style and look, but after nearly a decade absence of Street Fighter, that's what was needed to tell people that Street Fighter was back. After all, Street Fighter 2 is still the iconic Street Fighter game. It's a fun game filled with challenges and combos. After so many years, it was nice to welcome back an old friend. So with this video done, Street Fighter 5 should have its own big update out. So we'll be taking a look at that. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please hit that subscribe button. See you later.